Hello and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of May. I'm your host Daniel, and today we're going to talk about the UAE has secretly carried out attacks on Iran, fighting has continued in Ukraine despite the announced ceasefire, and Zelensky's ex-chief of staff has been named in a corruption inquiry. So firstly, the Wall Street Journal reported that the UAE has carried out military strikes on Iran, citing people familiar with the matter. According to the newspaper, the UAE has not publicly acknowledged the strikes, which included an attack on a refinery on Lavan Island in the Persian Gulf in early April. Throughout the ongoing conflict, the UAE has frequently accused Iran of launching missile and drone attacks against it, which we have seen videos and images of. So what? This is a significant step and one that could lead to further conflict, even if the US doesn't want it to happen and wants the conflict to end. Sadly, though, it is highly unlikely that the UAE could go it alone against Iran, who is a much larger and more experienced opponent and has much more military firepower in the region. So it's more likely that the UAE is going to try and get other nations, particularly the US, to try and join in if it does want to escalate this conflict with Iran. I think it's also unlikely that other Gulf states will come in to support the UAE, especially Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain, as the UAE just left OPEC. So I think it's unlikely they'll try and support them in that way, more likely to just leave them to try and do it by themselves. And next, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said fighting with Russia was ongoing despite the 3-day ceasefire that began on May the 9th. The pause in hostilities was announced by US President Donald Trump last week on Friday, with Ukraine confirming the news shortly after. The temporary ceasefire coincided with Russia's annual Victory Day parade, but both Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of violating the ceasefire. In a statement, Zelenskyy said that today there was no silence on the front, there was plenty of fighting, and we have recorded all of this. We also see that Russia has no intention of ending the war. Unfortunately, it's preparing for new attacks, he added. The White House has tried to finalize a deal that would end the war since 2025, but peace negotiations between the two countries have paused and seems highly unlikely at this stage. So what? I think it's highly unlikely that any ceasefire is going to work in the current conditions purely due to a lack of trust from each side. And this is likely going to be a significant issue going forward in any hopes to end the conflict, as it will likely require a third party to come in and provide security and support to ensure the two sides essentially don't fight, especially if, Ukraine doesn't get security guarantees and also if Ukraine gives up territory. Despite the somewhat positive words recently, especially coming out of Putin, I think it's unlikely the conflict will end anytime soon. And lastly, a powerful former chief of staff to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been formally accused of involvement in a major corruption probe. Ukraine's anti-graft agencies said that he is suspected of participating in a criminal group that laundered around 10.5 million US dollars through an elite housing development outside Kiev. The agencies did not name Yermak in line with Ukrainian law, but is widely identified by local media. Speaking to Radio Liberty, he denied owning real estate in the development but did not comment further. The announcement opens a new chapter in a month-long scandal that burst into view in November when anti-graft investigators said that government officials had siphoned $100 million out of state-run energy companies. This spurred a drive to root out corruption and led to the dismissal of ministers within Zelensky's inner circle. Andriy Yermak resigned later in November after anti-graft investigators searched his apartment. So what? This is the type of shit that really hurts Ukraine on the world stage. While they're doing good work to try and root out corruption, more needs to be done. Ukraine used to be the most corrupt country in Europe, and everyone basically thinks they're still uber corrupt. So any, Russia, any anti-Ukrainians around, this just gives them more ammo to point at corruption within both Zelensky's inner circle and Ukraine itself, which is how they try and dissuade countries like the US to providing support to Ukraine, essentially spinning false narratives such as Ukraine selling weapons on the black market and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a bit shit, and it just really hurts the war effort in a whole. Anyway, that's been the Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you again tomorrow. See you!